The Forgotten Genocide, the tragedy of Native Americans. Have you ever heard of a tragedy where an entire people were exterminated simply because their land was rich? Of a civilization deceived in the names of the gods, then mercilessly slaughtered. Today on Genin, we bring you one of the most horrific crimes in history. The genocide of the Native Americans, the indigenous peoples of the Americas. Stay with us. This story isn't for entertainment, but for remembrance and perhaps for reflection. The Forgotten Tragedy, Native Americans. In 2012, the American University Board decided to include the topic of the massacres committed by Americans against Native Americans in the high school U.S. history curriculum. As soon as the decision was announced, the media erupted. Major political figures objected, including the Republican National Committee, which called on Congress to investigate what it described as a distorted and inaccurate view of major events in American history. But the truth is, this objection was just another attempt to cover up one of the most horrific human tragedies ever, the tragedy of the Native Americans. A tragedy that claimed the lives of more than 112 million indigenous people from both North and South America. They were the original inhabitants of the land, uprooted from their homes, displaced, exterminated, and robbed of all their wealth. European colonizers didn't stop at deadly weapons, nor at burning villages and erecting gallows. They used even more despicable methods, gifting the Native Americans with blankets contaminated with smallpox and measles. Disguised as a gift, but it was a tool of genocide. The catastrophe began with the arrival of Christopher Columbus in 1492, who described the Native Americans as the kindest people on earth, the most naive and noble. They had a myth that gods would arrive from across the sea, so they welcomed Columbus and gifted him with the golden treasures, believing he was the savior. But they were surrendering themselves to the very man who would begin their annihilation. The Native Americans, whose ancestors came from Siberia 15,000 years ago, lived of farming and hunting. They spoke various languages like Quechua and Dakota and knew nothing of war. Their conflicts were settled with a word of honor. But everything changed when the Europeans arrived. A massive colonial campaign began, led by Spain, France, Britain, and Netherlands to enslave the indigenous people, loot their resources, and occupy their lands. The Native Americans fought back with fierce resistance. They waged over 40 bloody wars, most notably the Jamestown Massacre, the Pequot War, 1636, King Philip's War, 1675 to 1676, the Pueblo Revolt, 1680, the Cherokee War, and the Wounded Knee Massacre, 1890, in which hundreds of unarmed civilians were killed by the U.S. Army. Historians say the genocide wasn't just about land. It was also driven by a colonial religious vision. The colonizers saw themselves as the new Hebrews purging the promised land of the Canaanites. The result was catastrophic. Millions killed, cultures erased, rights denied to this very day. Even after the United States was established in 1776, the oppression of indigenous people continued. They were forcibly removed from their lands and confined to reservations. Today, only 4 million Native Americans remain, spread across hundreds of tribes, still fighting for recognition of their rights. And the occupation didn't stop at land. It reached even their image in the media. Hollywood portrayed them as savages. School children think feathers grow from their heads, and the West has kept pushing that image for 5 centuries. The story of the Native Americans is not just a chapter from the past. It's an open wound in the conscience of humanity. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to support us with a like and share, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that never made it into your school books. What do you think? Is history always written by the victor? Share your thoughts in the comments.